So now we're going to make a recording about everything that's been wrong with United States soccer at once, and we're going to solve everything at once in about the next few minutes. Anyway, so the way I started this conversation with a lot of people, good folks who wrote back, and of course they'll no doubt pass their opinions to their friends across the internet and across the globe, is that the American pay-for-play system is unworkable. And as the proof, they show the competitive or comparative systems in Europe or in South America, where of course most players are brought up by the international or national club scene. In other words, there is anything from Bayern Munich to Arsenal to Grêmio or Portolese or Frotolense or whatever the clubs are. And those clubs take young kids, age 10, 11, 12, 13, and they bring them up to the pro level. And of course, they have a lot of young kids whom they don't pay, and at the very top level, from 19 to 21, maybe 22, players are making pretty decent wages. They're considered pros, and there are very few people who make it to the pros, as typical in any sport. You can take 100 kids, maybe one or two will make it to the pros. So the winnowing process is up to the club. If a club doesn't see a player as having potential, whether they're 12 or 13 or 15 years old, to simply tell them, thank you very much, now we're going to go with other players, with other prospects. In the United States, this doesn't happen. In the United States, everyone plays, as long as they're willing to pay for it. This is why in Europe or in South America, there may be a couple of thousand prospects working in these club academies per nation. In other words, so there are 50 or 60 or 100 clubs that would be considered pro clubs, and then each of them has each of them has a certain number of players that they work with, and then they decide who they work with and who they don't work with. In the United States, it's the opposite. It's the kids and their parents decide whether the kid plays soccer or doesn't. That's why in the United States there are something like 800,000 registered players, and under the pay-for-play system, it costs between $2,000 and $4,000 to place your kids in the soccer academy, and then you have to pay extra for travel, etc., etc. So if you add all the expenses that are given by parents or paid by the parents mostly into the youth soccer scene, it's in billions of dollars. Now, what league can afford to pay billions of dollars to train kids that have no future of becoming pro players? So that doesn't happen. It cannot be eliminated. That's just the way it is. No matter how much Kyle Martino or Eric Winala talk about changing their soccer culture within the U.S., it's just not going to happen. United States soccer culture is going to be part of United States sports culture. And the United States sports culture, let me slow down, is always going to be based upon sort of the multi-tier system of high school and or academies, colleges and or minor leagues, and then top leagues going to be pros. In the United States, the winnowing process takes place by the high school coaches, then by college coaches, and then eventually by pro coaches. The levels in these tiers are separately and almost independent, or really are independent of each other. High school soccer, academy soccer exists at a given level. It brings in a lot of kids. It brings in hundreds of thousands of kids. Of those, very small portion will go and play college sports. Now, if you talk about American football, there were about 100 colleges, and they'll have about 80 players. So it's about 8,000 out of 100,000 players will make it to the college level. And out of 8,000 divided by 4, because most of them are 4 years, out of about 2,000 players, about 200 will make it to the pros, the next level. They go from one high school, which could be any, whatever they're born usually. I mean, so high school are, of course, geographically correlated to someone's birth and locale. And the second level, of course, they can go to university where they're recruited, and top recruits are recruited. Well, the top players are recruited by the biggest teams and by the most famous teams, the most famous coaches. So, if you're an American football prospect, you go to Alabama, you go to USC, you go to Notre Dame, you go to Wisconsin even. Formerly Stomping Ground. And then when you graduate, you go to whatever pro team selects you. There is no choice. There is no sequence of events. Now compare it with the global soccer scene. You go to an academy in some small village near Freiburg, or is there a village near Freiburg? I assume there is, or Newcastle or Middlesbrough, and you stay with the team up until you become a fairly competent player. Where is more light? There's more light on the left, there's more light on the right. So you go to the next level, but you stay within this system. You stay, if you go to a soccer academy, of course, the ideal, or as it's portrayed these days, is to have someone like Messi. You go into Barcelona academy, he grows up to be a great player and stays with Barcelona until his retirement. That can also happen. It's just completely impossible in U.S. sports. In U.S. sports, there is high school, and once you graduate high school, you can't go and play for high school anymore. That's your Barcelona academy. That's done. You can't play there. Then you go to college. Once your eligibility expires in 4 or 5 years, you can't play for college anymore. And if you can't make it in the pros, then you're out of the game. I mean, you can go and play, overseas if there's, international basketball or whatever. Now, but the choices are bigger. But the winnowing process is a lot sharper. In other words, you go from hundreds of thousands of players, youth, high school level, to a few thousand in the pros, in college, and then to a few hundred in the pros. Now, any European academy, and even the European league, like, very successful one like Bundesliga or the EPL, they're lucky to have a handful of players, youth players, move up to the rank of, real pros every year. Because if you have 5 players, great prospects, become a regular with the EPL club, then over the course of a decade or a little more, about 10, 12 years, you're going to have about 60 to 80 players you can choose from to play for a national side. Now, EPL is the highest level. It's the top paying league in the world. So to go from college, to go from youth academy to minor leagues or play the junior leagues, they have like those B leagues now or whatever, and actually make it to the pros, make it to the EPL, the highest level, that's a huge honor. So that's a winnowing process that happened over the years. The problem and the difference between European soccer and American, that the Europeans, even a league like EPL, might choose between top 10,000 players. Where in the United States, it's 800,000 players. Well, maybe there are 600,000 men, 200,000 women. So you can't have the system where the top club, whether it's MLS or whoever, any club in MLS pays for all the youth. It's just impossible. I mean, MLS club generates maybe $30 to $40 million in revenues, depending upon the location, whether they're Columbus Crew, that's kind of a bit out of luck, to Atlanta United, which plays at the big stadium and sells out really well. But the size of youth soccer dwarfs everything in comparison. It's much bigger. Furthermore, the second level, this is another asinine idea that Kyle Martino allegedly proposes to change, is that they can change the U.S. sports scene. The U.S. sports scene cannot be changed because NCAA is in charge, and NCAA is in control of college football and college basketball, two of the top most revenue-producing sports. In addition, and these are worth billions of dollars each. In addition to that, NCAA has tremendous political connections. In other words, every politician, you look in Washington, they have graduated from a college. Most of them graduated from 2 colleges, undergrad and grad. Many have gone to law school. Law schools don't usually have big soccer teams. So in any case, so what happened is that if NCAA wants a law, a given law, it will likely be able to push it through Congress. Now, how does it concern soccer? Well, the big thing about NCAA is that it has essentially half seasons. In other words, American football goes from August, through November. So it's like early September. So it's like 12 weeks, and most teams play 12 matches. They have a couple of 12 games. The college basketball goes about 5 months, from sort of November, December through March. But March is for the playoffs, the March Madness. And of course, college soccer is about 4 months long too. Now, in Europe or in South America or anywhere else, a youth soccer academy or going to the youth pro ranks is of course all year round. I mean, you take months off for vacation, then you come back, you have winter holidays, you have some holidays, whatever. Then you come back and you stay intact and you play and you practice all year round. You can't do this in America. So NCAA, that it controls everything on the college level, and allegedly or potentially could be that side step or intermediate step between really youth soccer, between really young kids and young prospects, to the pro level, because it is a 4-year school. So this is where the Europeans go to minor leagues to hone their craft. South Americans go to smaller teams to minor leagues to play reserve clubs and so on and so forth. In the United States, it's a 4-month season, and training is crap. I mean, the rules are different, and they had substitution rules in the past. Now, I mean, it's a little different. But you play a few matches. You play, about 20 matches per season, and that's it. You train for 4 months, you play for 4 months, then you go home, and then you can do whatever you want. But you're not in control of a high-quality coach, and you don't put enough time in. And you don't practice style that's preferred by anyone else. But that's not even the problem. The biggest problem, something that Kyle Martino will ignore, the biggest problem is that MLS is the top league. And MLS doesn't produce talent. Now, I've touched it many, many times before, why that matters and why pay-for-play doesn't matter. But what happened, listen, let's take an example of Akeem Olajuwon. Some people know he's a great, great basketball player, somebody who was born in Nigeria, came to the United States as an 18-year-old, playing for the University of Houston under Gus Gailuz. Now, when Akeem came in, he was a soccer goalkeeper. He couldn't play basketball, but he was 6'10", or he was listed at 7. He was like 6'10 and a half. Phenomenal athlete, and obviously intellectually capable of taking directions and learning how to play the sport. So within, half a decade, when he was the first player taken in the draft, and then, continue with his career in the pros, he pretty much learned every trick in the book. Now, the reason for it is because even though he went to college whose coach preferred, Faisal Majaman in the ramp and dunk down in court, they dunked the basketball. He was still taught the basic skills. This is something that is not generally taught at MLS. You come in and you stay at that level. Very few players become so much better over their next 3-4 years as they arrive at MLS, when they're 22, 23 years old. It takes them longer, and even then their skills are subpar. They basically become Graham Zusi Quattro. Now, Olajuwon was able, because it's paramount for a college coach to teach him some skills, even though he's not going to see this player again after 2 to 3 years, 4 years maximum. He still needs that player to learn some skills. And of course, once you go to the pro level, every pro coach needs to teach the necessary skills, and they combine both individual skills, the jumpers and the hook shots and the reverse step, whatever, those little fadeaway jump shots and so on and so forth, and hooks. And in the team concept, to where, where do you set the screen? Where do you move off the screen? How to run a fast break? How do you, play the defense as a last, stopgap block or whatever? This is all taught. It's not really taught in MLS. That's the problem. Now, I've been reading about the Lakers recently, and it's just a curiosity thing. And one thing I noticed is that Magic Johnson said they shoot so poorly from the outside, which is another inferiority of a college system where you needed a certain type of player for college, a different type for pros. They shoot so poorly from the outside, they're going to hire a shooting coach. Well, does MLS have shooting coaches? They have goalkeeper coaches, some do. Do they have special striker coaches, separate winger? They don't have it. It's pretty much you learn in a way. And if you don't learn it, well, that's the way you become. Now, if you look at, well, you know what? Let's do this part 2. It's coming up in 15 minutes, so I'm going to rant a little more a little later.